Thank you so much for joining us today on the Womxn Magic podcast. I have today my guest, Dua Rahman. She is so fabulous. She is a yoga instructor. She has her 200-hour training, and her Instagram is at all things Doa, which is so awesome. And not Doa, Dua. That's how you say it. Just so that you guys know. Um, so I am so grateful to have you here today. Thank you for being
Thank you so
here.
much for having me.
And we're going to have a really awesome conversation today, all revolving around you and your story. So I just feel really honored and just grateful to be in the same space as you. And I would really love it if we could start you off and just, get to know a little bit about you and your background, where you're from, all that stuff.
Yeah. So I'm first generation American. My parents came to the States from Pakistan in the 70s. Um, I have been a creative my whole life, but like basically via singing and writing primarily. But at a certain point, I stopped expressing myself creatively. Um,
Mhm.
and fast forward to um, going through major depression, anxiety, and eventually a divorce. It it brought me back to basically realizing what we lose by not expressing ourselves, especially creatively. Like I think I thought of it as like this cute hobby, um, versus something that's like literally an essential part of who I am.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Wow, that is so beautiful. I love that. And I really appreciate you beginning your talk on your value of something that was so innate, um, such as your creativity. And I truly think that so many of us take that aspect of ourselves for granted just because of society and just as what you said, like it's something like cute about yourself. So I'm really, I'm really just happy for you that you were able to realize that that was just part of who you are. Um, so you mentioned that you've gone through a whole um, bunch of things in your lifetime where you've struggled with mental illness, you've struggled with a divorce. Um, do you mind walking us through um, maybe right before uh, your marriage or when you were starting to feel those, you said the depression, the anxiety?
Yeah. It so depression and anxiety basically began to manifest for me my first year of marriage.
Mhm.
But um now that I can look at it, and hindsight is 2020, um, I can see that there were things that were leading up to that point. Um and not expressing myself creatively was definitely one of those things. I think the reason that became manifest, specifically that first year of my marriage, is because one, it was a time of transition, and transitions are like when a lot of what when like depression can show up for people. Um, and it was like an uprooting. So the foundation that I had my whole life of like the support of my family, like that ground was being taken from me, and it was like that. And when you are going into that transition and you don't find that support that you need, um it's a recipe for um a lot of things to show up. I spent a lot of time during those years feeling like, why is this happening to me? Where did this come from? um and blaming myself. But I've come to realize now that depression and anxiety are um, like signs, like on a road that are telling you, like, hey, not this way,
Mm,
turn around.
mhm.
And so they're really gifts to kind of bring us back to who we are and what we want and what makes us happy.
So, that is something that, as you're speaking, I think of other women, other people in relationships that might be experiencing the same thing, where um, they're they're recognizing that their their whole self is not quite there in a relationship due to a could be a plethora of things. Um, and I think about, you know, what these signs could be for these women. So I would really love to know if it would be okay if if you didn't mind sharing what those signs were for you, um, and what you experienced during that time.
Like, what was depression and anxiety trying to tell me, in other words?
Yes.
Mm,
Hmm.
yeah. So I think they both had different things for me. So like anxiety, um, like I would literally have panic attacks before. Well, I say panic attack, but I don't actually mean it. Like I know that some people like have panic attacks where they end up in the emergency room. So mine like were not to that degree, but it would be like me throwing myself on the floor, like not being able to like stop crying and like just and and I would that would cause me to indulge in a lot of self-blame afterwards because I'd be like, why did I do that? Why did I react like that? Like I felt like I was being childish. But they would happen usually before events,
Mm,
where I was supposed to go somewhere with my husband and my in-laws, and I'd be like, I'm not going, I can't go, and I'd just be like, and so we'd always be late, um, and yeah, at the time I really didn't like myself because of it. Like I didn't know why it was happening, but now I can see that really what that was my body was like, hi, you're in self betrayal right now. And like, we cannot let you go through with this because those events, um, I didn't feel safe to show up authentically there.
mm,
And I felt as if, um, I always just had to put on this show. So
mhm,
I'd put on these clothes and put on this makeup and go to this event and be this person that I wasn't. And it would like kill me each
mm,
time. And yeah. Um, and then there were certain things that I was doing because I felt that I should do them, or that they were the right thing to do. I wasn't being fair to myself and my values. Yeah.
um, that is something, isn't it? Where like we feel so like uncomfortable to not want to be ourselves somewhere, and it's like we feel so obligated to be there because it's like, oh well, it's my this, and it's how come you can't just come and just it's like I don't want to go into a place where I don't feel comfortable. Like I don't want to be somewhere where I can't be myself. So like, obviously, at the time, like the mind and the body did not connect in that, where like they both knew that. So how did you where was it in your marriage where you were like, all right, this is not it, this is not who I am, where I want to be? Do you mind walking us through that?
Yeah, for sure. Also, I realized I didn't answer the second part of your last question. So, the I answered for anxiety, but for depression, I felt like it's a little different because I feel like depression is our body's way of protecting itself from feeling a lot of pain. It just literally like, nope, we're not doing this today, not today, shut down, and then we just go like numb and we have no energy and we can't deal with things and it's literally it's because if we were to try and deal with all those things at once, it would be too much.
Mhm.
So um so I think then that caused me to really dig deep into finding out like where my pain was and um, when was the last time that I remember being happy and
Mm.
like sort of tracing my steps. But to answer your question of when I realized my marriage wasn't right for me. So actually, we dated for 2 years and those 2 years were good.
Mhm.
Um, but literally, it was like pretty much from the beginning of my marriage that I wasn't happy. But um, I was married for 5 years, and I spent the first 3 years thinking that every time something went wrong in my marriage, it was my fault.
Mm.
Um, so if I wasn't happy, I was like, oh, my anxiety and my depression, it's causing a rift in my marriage. I need to work on myself. Um, and it took 3 years um, for something to shift and for me to basically think about, is it my anxiety and depression that's causing my marriage to be bad? Or is my marriage bad and is that contributing to my anxiety and my depression? So, and I think that shift happened. So, my ex husband wasn't a great communicator.
Mhm.
Um, and because of that, uh, he harbored a lot of resentment.
Mhm.
Um, and over time, because he didn't have a way to express himself, um, and he was refusing to do therapy, um, that resentment turned into verbal abuse.
Mm.
And it happened so subtly that I didn't like I couldn't sit there and tell you like the date that it started, right? And I was just like sitting in it, basking in it, soaking it in, and it was definitely contributing to my depression.
Mm.
Um, and there was a time in 2017 when I actually heard it. Like he said the words and I heard them.
Mm.
And I was like, wait, um, how long has this been happening? And the specific words he said in that moment that I heard were, you're useless. And what I thought of was, wait, do I feel useless? And I realized that I did. And then I said, okay, I can't stay in this environment because then I at that point I realized the relationship, the correlation. Yeah.
Wow. That's such a profound, like, moment. You know what I mean? Like, that
Hmm.
is just such a profound moment where something's been happening for such a like a whoever period of time since you weren't really aware of how long, since it is silent in a way, you know? Um, and it's like in that one moment, it's like everything just like clicked together and then more clicking and then more clicking and you're like it was like it's like one of those like mind explosions, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
Um, and I really think that it was, and I in the world of like DV, like the word strong is used a lot. Like you're so strong, you're so brave, but like and there's said so much that I feel like sometimes like a lot of the people who hear it's like, oh, you're so strong, you're so brave to like leave a marriage. You're like, oh my god, like please, like stop using those words. But like in my like in this space, like I just really want to emphasize the strength that you had to talk to yourself in which you were battling it was like the battlegrounds of your depression and your anxiety, um, to talk to, not even just like your mind, to talk to your body, to talk to your soul. Like, I mean, like, maybe in the moment it wasn't realized, because like I find myself going back and being like, wow, that was like a metaphysical experience. Um, but you were really like speaking true to yourself and to your soul, and then to literally unapologetically now be here away
Mm.
from that is just incredible. You know, you know, no one deserves to be called useless. You know, like no one is ever, no one should be verbally abused ever. So it's really so incredible to me at time and time again when I hear stories and I hear um, the wake up moment, the this is it moment, and it always just like brings me in awe every time. Um, so you left the marriage, right? And was it like a difficult period of time trying to leave? Did he give you any issues? And if you don't want to answer, obviously let me know.
No, no. Yeah, so thank you for saying all of that. It definitely requires one to like have the strength to choose oneself um over like what's comfortable and what's easy. Like staying is comfortable, staying is easy, staying is familiar. During my depression, I experienced a lot of brain fog and just lack of clarity. What day is it? What time is it? Who did I speak to today? uh all of that, it was all a blur. And it was around that time that I started working on and figuring out what I needed to do to heal. So I was doing that in multiple ways. One way is I was working with a therapist who was having me figure out my thoughts, because before that point, due to the brain fog, he asked me, for example, what is the first thought you have when you wake up in the morning? And at that time, I didn't know the answer. So he said, okay, now from now on, when you wake up, I want you to write down your first thought. And and I started doing restorative yoga, which was really beneficial for me because it was a way to decelerate my nervous system, and I was really high stress at the time. And when you're in fight or flight, it's really hard to have clarity. Um, and I was also taking like movement and nature and sunlight, these things really seriously.
Mhm.
So there was no coincidence between the time when I heard my ex say those words, and realizing like, okay, I can't stay here, because I was already in that process of healing, and then I was able to like really identify that as toxic, and also really have the clarity to actually hear it, even though he'd been saying it for a long time.
Really, that is so truly incredible to me because you you went from a really deep depression where it was like numb, like very numb, very like, you know, um, really feeling into the fact that like I don't know, I just feel this like very like what is the point feeling, very just like day in, day out, like very mundane, you know? I actually know that form of depression very well. And I honestly think that it's so beautiful that you took this initiative in alignment with your soul purpose, with your life purpose, just like not knowing, you know, and um the fact that you went from not knowing your first thought in the morning to then doing all these beautiful practices for yourself, like I find that to be just stunning, incredible. Like I could give you all of the positive adjectives in the world because it takes a lot. It takes a lot of focus when you're depressed because it's like, what is focus? Like you were just saying, it takes a lot of it takes a lot of being strict with yourself in a form of like, listen, me, like, even though we don't think that we're worth it right now, or even though we don't think that this is even going to help, especially in like the earlier stages, we have to keep going. And I'm just in awe in hearing this. Um, so in your process of when you left, and kind of like I feel that it's like this period of life recovery, because I feel like this was a major life event. Um, do you mind talking about what that experience was like? Like what was recovery like?
Mhm. Um, so I feel like my first year was the worst of my depression, where I literally couldn't get out of bed, didn't have energy for anything, would eat my first meal at 6 p.m. Um, and I felt, um, I actually had like this thought and this vision of myself as if I was in jail,
Mm,
because it's like a mental prison. And I at that time I used to watch a lot of like prison shows on Netflix because I felt like I related. And it was also frustrating because I knew mentally, I'm like, this is not your reality. You are free. Why are you like, I felt like I was putting myself in that jail.
mm,
Um, but literally I would look out of my window and feel that way, like feel like I can't leave because I didn't have the energy to. Um, and from that first year, um, actually what triggered my healing journey was, I talked to a therapist. Before that point I had never had therapy in my life. And I had a couple of friends who were social workers who were trying to get me to see someone. And I spoke to someone on the phone. And um, she heard my entire story. um, and then she asked me like what I could afford, all of that. And she ended the conversation by saying like, sorry, I'm not going to be able to help you. And like didn't provide any resources, didn't, anything. um and so for someone to listen to my entire story and like know like exactly what kind of pain I was in, and then just, and like that's her job. And to end the conversation with like, sorry. um it um it made me angry. And at that moment I felt like, wow, like no one cares. If I don't do this for myself, no one's going to do it for me.
mm,
And actually, like without intending to, like no thanks to her, but but it helped me because my own anger helped me. Like we were created with all these emotions for a reason. Like anger can push you to
mm,
action.
mm,
Um so that was when I decided like I didn't know how I was going to do it, but I was going to just try to take control of my life and do whatever I had to do. So we started by, we moved from where we were living. At that time, I was living with my in laws, and we moved to New Jersey. And when I got to New Jersey, I basically made a plan for myself. Um, I started organizing events on meetup.com, um, as a way to force myself to connect with others. I had been on the Meetup app for years and never gone to an event, because of just the anxiety of like, what will it be like? What will these people be like? Will they be welcoming? And then I finally decided like, I'm going to organize this event and I'm going to be in charge of welcoming others. um, and that was such a beautiful experience for me. I created lots of groups and met a lot of different people. Um, I signed up for yoga for the first time. There was a studio nearby, and that's how I discovered restorative.
Mhm.
I also found a lot of catharsis in yoga in general. Um, I was really lucky at that time. I was living in a very beautiful, like rural part of New Jersey, central New Jersey, um, where I had access to like beautiful greenery all the time. Um, there was also this spa that I would visit regularly. It was like those Korean spas where you could just pay like 20 something dollars and just get access to the whole this huge place. And when I think back at like how well I was taking care of myself at that moment, I'm like, if I wasn't happy then, there's just no way I would have been happy in that marriage. Like I was just like if I was doing those things for myself now, like if I had all access to all of those things, the regular spa and the regular and all that stuff, yeah. Um, and so it started to just build from there. And actually, when I left, um, it got worse before it got better.
Mm.
Um, because again, leaving was another transition. Um, and when I left, I didn't think I was going to get divorced. I thought I'm going to leave because this is not healthy for me. I cannot heal in this space where someone thinks this of me, much less says these things about me to my face. Um, but I felt if he comes around to understanding the need for therapy in our marriage, then we'll be able to work it out.
Mhm.
So I just thought I was leaving temporarily. Um, but because I had not shared that whole process with my family, like my parents didn't know much about my depression and my anxiety. And they found out like all about my marriage issues right when I decided I was going to leave.
Mhm.
Um, my mom wasn't prepared for it, and she was still asking a lot of questions about what we can do, um, if we can talk to him, things that I knew weren't right for that moment, that we really just needed space. Um, and there was a time, not due to anyone's fault, but just like due to my own thoughts and feelings um, about the situation, that I kind of just felt like, okay, I'm leaving my husband's house, so I no longer belong there. I I'm not feeling that comfortable in my parents' house. So like, where do I go?
Mhm.
Where do I belong? And that was the first time that I actually had like suicidal thoughts. Um, and I was able to work through that with a therapist. Um, and he came up with like a plan for me of like people to call if I had those thoughts. And I chose like two or three friends and family members to share that with.
Mhm.
Um, and so that really helped. And then what I decided to do is I moved in with my cousin for 6 weeks. And that ended up being a really good decision for me because it was like a neutral place where there's a lot of like I come from a collectivist culture.
Mhm.
So I'm forgetting the word for it right now, but when it has something to do with boundaries, when like my feelings become someone else's feelings and my
Mhm.
problems become someone else's problems.
Mhm.
um there's a specific word used for it, but um that is really what the issue was in my household. Like my dad was like, when you're depressed, I'm depressed. um and so it wasn't the ideal place for me in that moment to be able to process what I needed and how I needed. um So yeah, being able to spend those 6 weeks with my cousin were really helpful. Um, and at that time, I wrote down a list of things that were helping me. And now when I look at that list, I'm glad I wrote it down because I don't think I could write this list now because it's almost like it's basic and it's intuitive now to me, like it's things that I do. But I realize that for someone that's like in the depths of depression, that's like I have no energy and I have no um, direction.
Mhm.
That it's a really helpful list, actually. Yeah, just a list of tools. And then I think, like in the beginning, you just kind of identify a few tools that work for you, and then as your healing journey progresses, um, more and more tools just keep coming your way. Yeah.
Wow. Literally, I'm like I'm speechless because
That's a mouthful.
no, no, I'm speechless honestly because what what courage, what resilience, what um beautiful fire you stirred up inside of yourself when you were told, "Nope, I can't help you." Um and I truly admire that was something that made you angry and you allowed for that anger to be there. Um, because I know a lot of us struggle with being angry, especially women. We're like, "Is that okay?" Um, and I just think that that was just such a it was like a moment of the mirror of, like, who you really are. And, like, when you got angry, you looked in the mirror and you went, "I'm strong enough to do this."
Mm,
And that's so cool to me. Um, I also really appreciate your sharing of, how difficult it was to the point where you reached suicidality. Um, and I really admire whoever your therapist was that was really with you and giving you plans and, giving you a really strong sense of um, guidance and space because that's really what I'm sure you needed during that time. Um, so there's one story that you told me that I actually want to ask you about because it's probably one of my favorite stories regarding yoga.
mhm.
Um, so do you mind telling us this lovely experience that you had while in yoga?
Signed up at this yoga studio near my apartment in New Jersey, and it was one of those deals, like 30 days for this many dollars. And it was like in my first or second week. Um, and I think at the time I didn't know too much about yoga. I was just doing it because I felt like I needed movement, coming out of that space where I hadn't like left my bed or my room in so many days. And um, I felt like yoga would be a gentle way to move myself.
Mm,
Um, I didn't feel ready for like hit exercise or anything like that. And I found myself in class, and in one pose, our instructor asked us to put our legs against the wall, our like legs up the wall. And I'm laying there, and then she places a like a weighted sandbag on top of my feet, and immediately I'm like bawling. And I'm like, what is this? Why did that just happen? um yeah, and then I was like, okay, I need to dive deeper into this yoga thing because there's something here, that's healing, and that's a form of catharsis for me. Yeah.
It's like my favorite story because like it's just it's like, yoga in itself is obviously a practice of breath, body, awareness, love, all of that amazing goodness. It's just so powerful to me that in a moment of where like you're really trying to become more self-aware, you get the gift of yoga and it teaches you another form of how you can ground yourself, hence the
Mm.
sandbag. Like that was so like metaphorical. Like I loved it. So you said that so you've mentioned, and obviously I know this myself, but you mentioned that you're part of a collectivist culture.
Mhm.
And I know that for a lot of I'll say people, but mostly women who are trying to leave marriages. If they come from a collectivist background, it's like extremely difficult to leave a marriage. So
Mm.
I wanted to ask you if someone who is either in your culture and another collectivist culture were struggling with this and they were really concerned about their entire family having this reaction, what would be some advice that you would give to them?
That's a great question. Yeah, I think I've heard a lot of like horror stories and like um as a kid watching like Bollywood movies, I've seen like the worst like villains portrayed where they basically tell their daughters like, now you're going to your husband's house, you're going to either come back dead or not at all. Like like there's no other option. Like, no, divorce is not an option, right?
Hmm.
I personally was really, really lucky. Um, my parents love me unconditionally. Um, and really like they didn't even want me to marry my ex-husband. So that was like something I fought for, another story for a different time.
Yeah.
um, but yeah, even despite that, so when I decided I wanted to leave, my father was really my strength at that time because I still wasn't so strong where I felt like I was doing the right thing. I didn't know if that was the right thing. I felt like that's what I should do because I realized how it was hindering my healing being there.
Mhm.
Um, but before that point, I hadn't discussed it with anyone, because I had this idea of like um, honor of like of protecting my husband and like not sharing his flaws and all that stuff. So I hadn't like talked to my friends. I hadn't talked to my parents. Um, and I needed in that moment to be able to share my story with someone and have them tell me like, am I wrong? Like I wasn't sure myself.
Mhm.
What also helped me is the therapy, because the therapist was like, you need to leave. And like a lot of times therapists will be more neutral and they'll say like, well, what do you want to do? Like my therapist was like, no, you need to leave.
No options. Wow. Oh my
um,
gosh.
yeah, so that really helped. But uh, what happened is I called my parents over and I said, I need to talk to you guys. Please come over. And they didn't have any idea what it was about. And I just basically dropped it all on them. I was like, here's what's going on. And what should I do?
Mm.
Should I stay? Should I leave? And my father looked at my mom and he's like, well, I already know what I'm going to say, so you can go first. And my mom was like, well, I'm just shocked. I don't know what to say. And my dad was like, okay, if you don't know what to say, I'm going to tell you. You should have left yesterday.
Oh my gosh, your dad sounds fun.
Yeah. And my dad's like, matter of fact, pack your stuff. We're leaving now. Okay, dad, like I have a lot of things I need to like tie up here first. It's gonna take me a couple weeks at least. Like I can't just
Oh man, that's so
but yeah.
cool.
Yeah, God bless him. Like it was really so supportive. Um, and I know women that have left without that family support, but we need something that's like a grounding. So whether that be some like financial independence that you have so you know that you'll be okay. Some friends that you have, um, sometimes like a domestic violence agency. I used to volunteer for one actually at one point, and I know they would sometimes like offer to like fly you to a different place and um, and like cover all of that.
Mhm,
But it's really difficult, I think, like the less support that you have to be able to have that courage. And
mhm,
that's, I think, one of the reasons why uh, women don't leave, or it takes them so long to leave. Um, I think also sometimes it doesn't have to be your parents. It can be your uncle. It could just you just need to find someone that hears your story, that wants to be there for you. And then also you need to have the trust in them that like they've got me and this is going to be
mm,
okay. Yeah, because
mm.
I think that's another thing in DV, like um your partner may try to convince you that like no one has you but him.
Yeah, that's so true because I heard so many stories doing my DV work, and it was just so like, and I'm gonna use the what is the Gen Z term, astronomical. It was so astronomical because it was like you can't even fathom that somebody has the audacity to treat someone like that, or like, I would hear these things and I'd be like, just just horrified for the person, or I'd feel like heartbroken, or I'd feel like all these things for them, and I could literally not even imagine what the person would be going through. Like,
Mm.
um there is this one woman who, she was getting a divorce, had a child who had disabilities, and the husband was a lawyer, so he was representing himself. You know where that went. You know what I
Mm.
mean? Like, he got everything he wanted. So it's like, in these, like, situations, it's so tricky because it's like believing the victim, which across the board, believing the victim in every single type of those situations, um, and the fact that the partner still sometimes has power
Mm.
even after, because they try to continue that power and control cycle. I'm really just, like, really, happy for you that you were able to have this experience, and I feel that your advice that you gave, even though, yours was, like, as you said, like more favorable than others, um, that you have this advice that feels very communal. You know what I mean? So, like, even if someone's going through this, like, really difficult time, it's like self-care, finding things that, like, that one thing and that one moment of clarity from that depression, like, make sure you grab hold of that. Um, Friends, family, a specific family member, like those things that you named, like, I feel can really help across the board, as well as mentioning the domestic violence agencies and hotlines, because like, that's what they're there for. They want
Mhm.
you to be safe, um, and they want for you to be as free as you can be, even through the hardships that you're experiencing. Um, so I'm curious because we didn't talk about post it all, Dua.
Mm.
Um, what does it feel like now? What is it like after all of that?
Yeah. I think in 2018 I started a journey of coming back home to myself
Mm,
that I'm still in the process of.
mhm.
Um, and sometimes that required connecting to my child self and like what made me happy then, what did I want out of life then. Um, and um, I used to draw a lot at the time, and I used to have an interest in teaching. I used to grade my drawings. Like I used to take a red pen and be like, "Great job, check plus."
My gosh, that's
So
so cute.
I was combining like my teaching desires with like my creative skills, and then in literally first grade when we first started getting assignments to write in our journals. Um, and I would write journal entries that included all of the students in the class, their names. And they would have us like read them out loud. And usually they would just like pick like, 3 or 4 students to like read their journals for the day. But like everyone in the class would be like, please have Doa read it, please. So yeah, it was like my first like grand um
It's so cute.
in my first grade. Um, and so yeah, reconnecting to those things. I used to sing a lot, and then um, connecting to who I was at 16, um, and and then just yeah, just putting back those like in some ways it's funny like I had a cousin who used to call me J Lo because I used to wear like velour outfits and like hoop earrings. And there was like a period of um, like basically between 18 and 30 that I didn't like, that I was dressing completely different than that. And then starting 2018, I started like getting back into my hoop earrings and like, and just like just finding my 16-year-old self. And like, I was like, okay, let's start here. And so I think I'm still in that process.
Mm, thank you for your authenticity and like, really speaking true to yourself and to your journey. Thank you for providing so much guidance to every single person that will watch this. Any woman that's in that is in the situation that you were in, um, or are in right now, where you're post and still kind of going through the motions.
Mm,
Um, and I just really appreciate all of the strength that it takes to retell a story that involves so much trauma. It
mm.
really means a lot. Um,
Thank you so much. I wanted to clarify one point,
yeah.
and also just to provide value, just give like a few tools for anyone that's struggling right now. So one point I wanted to clarify was I don't consider myself a DV victim.
Mhm,
I was just giving that like as a tool for someone who might be suffering.
mhm,
But um, it's interesting because there's like DV is about power and control, you
mhm,
know? And so there's that. And then there's just the fact that like hurt people, right? So I feel like my ex was just really, had a lot of pain inside of him that he had never dealt with.
mhm,
Um, and that's the other thing about when you decide to leave. Sometimes it feels like there needs to be this huge reason, like um, I was physically abused, I was cheated on, right? Or like these are the only acceptable reasons to leave.
mhm,
um, but sometimes it's also just, this is not working for me anymore. And my partner's not willing to like work on this anymore and not invest in this. And so I have to choose me.
Mm,
Yeah.
it's beautiful. Thank you. I
Mm.
appreciate that. I really do, because I'm sure that, there are also people out there that might be shaming themselves for exactly what you just said, like, it's not like a good enough reason, so I guess I have to stay. So I really appreciate that. Um, and then you said that you want to offer tools. I
Yeah.
love this.
Um,
Thank you.
yeah. So there's a few. I think I'll focus on my top three.
Mhm,
So the first one I would say is doing a lot of self inquiry.
mhm,
What do I want? What makes me happy? What am I good at that I can use to spread love and light and joy and hope in the world, regardless of my current state?
mhm,
Because I think service can pull us out of our own, you know, this is wrong or that is wrong or I don't have energy. Like I find myself like my energy awakens when I'm able to serve.
mhm,
Um, and then in serving others, like I've found so much healing and ways of coming back to myself through that as well. Um, so that would be one. And what was really helpful for me, honestly, like on Instagram, there are so many like great therapists that put up questions. So that's a starting point for someone that doesn't have necessarily a lot of money to be able to invest in it. But also working with a life coach, a lot of them are specifically, they provide you a lot of questions to be able to ask yourselves. But so that would be the first. The second is um, there's a book, Miracle Morning by Hal Elrod, and he talks about a morning routine. Um, and the mnemonic for the morning routine is savers. So it's, let's see if I can get this. I might not be in the right order, but scribing, affirmations, visualizations, exercise, reading, and silence.
mhm,
So if you can start your morning with those things. Um, and what helped me actually make that practical, I listened to a Tony Robbins podcast one time where he said, if you have at least 15 minutes and anywhere up to an hour, um, you can kind of put these things into one. So what he recommends is keeping your sneakers next to your bed when you go to sleep, and when you wake up in the morning, throw those sneakers on, um, go on a walk, and start breathing to like a rhythm. So maybe it's like a 4 count, and then do affirmations and like walk to that rhythm as well, and do affirmations to that rhythm. So maybe if it's 4 count, I can, I will, whatever affirmation you feel
mm,
that you need. And then keep walking, and then eventually start to count the things that you're grateful for. Gratitude is such a major shifter, because when we're in depression and anxiety, we're just focusing on all of the negative things. And gratitude can really like just bring you out of that. And so um, when I would start doing that, I would literally be walking around my block like a crazy woman, like crying. And I felt like my neighbors were just like, oh, here's the crazy woman again that cries in our neighborhood on a daily basis.
oh, no.
but but here is like that's a manifestation of a transformation that's happening, a transition that like your body is like, wait, a recognition of, because when you really start to count all of the things that you have and all the things that you can be grateful for, a shift occurs. And then the final thing was visualization, which was just imagining your day, how you want it to go, and your life, like an ideal life. And there's so many more tools, but just for brevity, I think that's a good place.
Thank you. Oh my gosh. You know what's crazy? During podcasts, I'm like, is there any like normally I'd be like, is there anything that you would like to like say like that? And
Mhm.
I don't know for some odd reason I didn't, but I'm glad that you did it in this way that you did because it shows how much you wanted to help others 1,000%. So I actually really appreciate this. And that is how you see how Doa is. Dua, I know we've been going back and forth with her name. I'm sorry, it's Dua. Um, it's just been, she said she's just told me her whole life she's been called Dua, so this is new, okay?
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
it's
It's
Dua.
not Casey, so I did. I'm in the process of reclaiming my name myself, so I introduce myself both ways at the moment. So that's where that comes from. Yeah.
Yeah. And so again, I just want you guys all to know her Instagram is all things Doa. Um, and I don't know why when I say your Instagram name, that's what I say.
It makes sense because it's Doa the Floa, right? Like it's
Yeah, that I guess that's the thing too. Yeah. So
and
so
also it's
please,
spelled that way, so
yeah, thank you. Thank you. Thank you for everything. Like seriously, from the bottom of my soul to my toes to my head, like thank you so much
yes.
because I know that you have helped somebody today. Like I know you've helped someone. I know you've helped multiple people, but at least we all know that at least you're helping someone, and that's awesome. And I so appreciate you from the bottom of my heart. Um, thank you for your time. Thank you for your story. Thank you for just being so open, raw, awesome, and for providing so much value in this episode. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yay! Um, tune in next week, everybody. I don't know who I'm gonna have on, but it's always a surprise. So tune back next Thursday at 11 a.m. and we will see you very soon. Bye.